Hey everyone, my name is Wolfram. I'm the founder of Arcentry, and in this video, I want to give you a quick tour through our tool. Now, if we would have done our job properly, this video wouldn't exist, right? Everything would just be self-explanatory, and I like to think that to some extent at least it is. So this video is not going to show you every last feature of Arcentry. Instead, it's going to focus on the larger aspects, and it's especially going to focus on some less obvious workflows that will make your life using this tool on a day-to-day basis so much easier. All right, let's start with components. So on the left-hand side here, you have the component library. We distinguish between effectively just two different kinds of components: pre-made components and customizable ones. Now, pre-made ones are, for instance, this Postgres database here, right? So I can place it, can rotate it, can read up on it, but that's very much it. Whereas customizable components are things, for instance, like this computer. I can fully configure it, I can send its background color, its foreground color, can even put an icon on it, and so on. Now, for the vast majority of components, there are actually generic and customizable versions as well. So I can search for them by saying generic database, and I can set up my own version of this Postgres database and make it look super dark with a bit of green highlights. Yeah. You can find all of these under the generic and customizable components category. So here's a long list of generic things, basic geometric shapes, just blocks and the likes, or things that are not directly hardware components, but things like computers, smartphones, billboards, and so on, that you can use in your diagrams. So let's delete these two, and let's build a very basic architecture. I'm going to start by copying this Postgres database and paste it twice. Let's put this here and here. You copy and paste by pressing Control or Command on Mac, C for copying and Control Command V for pasting. Let's move them over here and let's connect them with a line, right? So what I like to do is I like to add these 45-degree angles so that when it grows a bit, it looks more like a microchip, like a PCB or something. And I'm connecting the ends of this line directly to the object anchor point, so that when I later move the object, the line sticks to it. Now, when it comes to connecting the center component, I'm not gonna draw another line. Instead, I'm gonna select this line, and I'm gonna double click it here. And that adds another anchor point. And now I can branch off from that, add the third component. And the benefit in doing that is that it's still just one line group. So any setting applies to the whole thing. The corners are rendered nicely, all of that. All right, let's add a third line, branch it off a bit. And to do that, I usually find it easier to do it in top-down mode. You can switch to top-down or 2D mode by pressing this button here, 2D, 3D, or by pressing X on your keyboard. And in general, there's lots and lots of shortcuts and hotkeys in Arcentry. Click this button down here and it brings up this menu that shows you a list of the available key combinations. Now here I also see that this point is a bit off, and let's branch off from here. Done. Very nice. Now, while I do this, you see me move the canvas around a lot in this panning motion. And I always do it by holding down the mouse wheel and moving the mouse. However, if you don't like that, there's other ways as well. You can do so by pressing space and moving the cursor around. Or you can switch to panning mode down here. And you leave this panning mode by right-clicking, just as any other mode. Alright, so let's add some arrows to our lines. Arrows in multi-line groups, these groups that branch off multiple times, are a little bit tricky. You can use these controls here, and Arcentry will make an intelligent guess as to what constitutes a line ending to your line. And this worked quite nicely, you can see it here. However, if you want to add an arrow only to a specific anchor point, you can also press that. You see the single arrow here, and do it this way. Now, this might be a good point to quickly talk about selecting things. Now you see me click things and they're selected. Of course, you can also draw a selection rectangle. But there are also two other ways. If you want to select all components or all lines or so on of the same kind, you can double click any one of them and Arcentry will select the other ones for you. Or you can hold down Control or Command on Mac and click them one after another. And when you do that, you see this multi-select display in the sidebar here. And this is actually really, really handy because especially when your architecture grows very convoluted and there's a lot of stuff going on, lots of overlapping components, this makes it easy to pick a specific component from a selection. So I want the center post width. There we go. Really nice. Cool. Let's add an area to our diagram. Let's switch back to top-down view for that and draw it around here. That looks good. Now, similar with areas, you can set their fill color and their line color. You can make this a bit darker if you like, and you can add a drop shadow for dramatic effect. But just like lines before, areas allow you to draw these complex polygonal shapes. To do that, you click anywhere on the border and it adds another anchor point. And now I can move this anchor point around and I can add another anchor point here, and I have my beloved 45-degree angled borders, and I'm using this crosshair to make sure that everything is aligned nicely. Another cool feature of areas is the ability to add these little walls around them. This is great if you want to visualize security zones or concepts like virtual private networks or virtual private clouds. You select this up here. You can even set the color of this wall that goes around it, and it leaves, as well as its height, and it leaves this little gap here wherever there's a line intersecting it. And of course, it's fully editable and follows the outline of your area. If you work with multiple overlapping areas, things can get a bit tricky. So if I draw another area here, this area is now on top. If I prefer this area to be on top, I can increase its Z index, and now it overlaps the other one. Right, let's get rid of this, and let's add a label to our area. I'll put that here. And you immediately notice something, right? So we have the situation where this line is intersecting. Let me make this solid to make it a bit more obvious. Our text can be a bit hard to read. So it comes with an outline around it. And this is something I can really, really recommend. So all you do is you select outline here, make the same background color as the area or the background it's on. And then you can also decide how much margin you want around that. So if I turn this off, you see this, no, that wasn't turning it off. That's turning it off. It sort of blends into each other. That's not great. So add an outline and give it a good bit of space so the text is easy to read. You can also, of course, have multi-line labels. This is a multi-line label. You can set the text orientation and so on. Same goes for icons. Arcentry makes it easy to add any number of icons to your diagram. So say I want to add, I don't know, a file. That looks like a good file here. Put that here, center this with my line. And likewise, there is an outline around my icon, keeping it from blending directly into the line, right? So if I turn this off again, that looks a bit crap. You don't want that. You want this. Arcentry also allows you to add any kind of images to your diagram. So I'm going to do this here. That's where I want my image to be. So I'm going to upload an image of my dog when she was still tiny. Click it, and you can see this here. And you can choose down here whether you want the picture to be stretched to move the borders of your box, or if you want it to maintain its aspect ratio. Finally, there's a number of widgets. We're going to skip charts for today because I want to do another one of these videos explaining about Arcentry's programmability, its API features, and its integration with monitoring services such as CloudWatch by AWS. And that's really when the chart comes into play. So for now, let's look at scaling groups. Scaling groups are a great way to visualize auto-scaling constructs within cloud providers, for instance, or an array of nodes that are maintained by Kubernetes or the likes. The way they work is as follows, right? You have this yellow arrow, and you have this magic square that you only see when you select it. And what that does is, if you take a component, say our Postgres database, and you place it on this magic square, and you select your auto-scaling group, you can now see that it detected, hey, there is this particular kind of component on me, and now I can simply scale that up and down. And this is actually really handy, especially later on, again, when you do an API-driven diagram, to scale these up and down without having to write your own logic on how to position them within your diagram. Now, these are very much the core features, but let me show you some additional bits that make working with especially large diagrams really, really easy. Let's start with layers. Arcentry has a concept of layers. If you've used Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator or one of these products, you're sort of familiar with that, right? Here's how it works. You add a new layer, call it, I don't know, stack 2, and you select a color. This color only helps you identify what layer is what in the UI. It doesn't have any visual impact beyond that. Cool. And now what I can do is I can select a bunch of my components and assign them to this layer. You see how the selection rectangles change color. So if I select everything, I can immediately tell what object is on what layer. And now I can easily hide everything on the layer, or I can lock it, which prevents it from being editable. And this is especially useful if you're working with a lot of areas, a lot of lines, and you want to lock the whole basically background layer and only work on the foreground layer. Now that I've set up this breathtaking diagram, let's look at how to actually export things, right? So the easiest thing I can do is I can download it as an image. Set a resolution here, so I want this to be 800 wide, and it automatically adjusts the height accordingly. I can switch that as well or unlock both. I have a choice of PNG and JPEG. Of course, JPEG doesn't provide background transparency, so if you want transparent backgrounds, you need to use PNG. And draw this. I can decide whether I want to have the actual grid in the picture or not. And once I'm happy, I hit download, and here's my image. Now, one thing that's really, really cool about Arcentry is that it's a fully WebGL based application, and it's generated procedurally. That means that you're not really limited to pixel grid resolutions or anything. What I can do is I can only pick a tiny, tiny portion of my diagram, say this here, but I can say, hey, all right, I want this to be really, really big. So say 2000 by 1400 roughly. Let's download just that. And you can see how everything is still crystal clear here. That's really, really nice. But static images are not exactly the pinnacle of excitement. So Arcentry gives you two more options. It allows you to embed a little 3D viewer widget in a blog post, or it allows you to create a live 3D version of your diagram that can be updated in real time via the API or by editing the document directly. And that is really cool if you want to embed it in a monitoring dashboard such as Grafana, or just display it on a large screen on the wall of the office. Let me show you the first one. Static embeds create a copy of your document at this point in time that is then embeddable. The way this works is you go, all right, blog post -1, and I want to create that. And now it gives me this iframe code that I can use to embed this sort of little 3D viewer. To give you an example of what this actually looks like in the wild, have a look at our blog, for instance, and That's an example. So basically, you can stick your diagram directly into a blog post. That makes for a really cool user experience. A bit, a bit innovative. People can play with it, zoom in, and it's also a good way to have really large and complex architectures in a blog post, and then your users can interact with them, zoom in, and the likes. Cool. As for live embeds, they work similarly. You turn this on here, and it generates a URL with a particular key that makes it publicly accessible, but only if you have that key. And it also saves the current camera position. And you see this actually, this is quite interesting. So if I move the canvas around here, this URL changes. So at any point, you can just copy this and you'll get the exact view you have that you can easily embed in any iframe or anything else. Just the way it is. And the cool thing about that, of course, is it's live, meaning it's adapting to change in real time. So if that's still locked. So if I move this around, you can see your live embed match these changes. While we're at this, let's talk about sharing documents. Now, Arcentry allows you to collaborate with other users in real time in a way that you used to from probably Google Docs or so. So what I've done here is I've opened a second version of Arcentry in the Incognito tab, and it's logged in with a different account. And if I want to share my document with that account, all I have to do is I click down here. Already shared that with me, hold on. And say, all right, I want to share this with Wolfram at arcentry.com. That's the account on the right-hand side. Hit enter. Oh. And you see the other user get a notification here. I can click open now. And here's my diagram shared with me. And likewise, I can edit it, he can edit it. It's very nice. All right. This gives you a rough idea of the basics of using Arcentry. Of course, there are a lot more features, and as mentioned before, we're going to do a second video talking about the programmability, talking about how to interact with these diagrams, how to integrate monitoring tools such as AWS CloudWatch or Datadog and the likes, how to trigger alerts and have them visually represented within your stake, and so on and so on. So stay tuned, have a look at this channel. Thanks so much for watching. And if you want to give Arcentry a go, and you haven't yet, it's free to try. Just head over to arcentry.com. Thanks so much.